Great. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, Driving, Measuring, and Turbocharging Client Engagement in the Legal Arena. My name is Shad, and I work with the business development team here at edynamic, very focused on helping professional service firms and law firms improve digital client engagement and realize ROI on their marketing technology spends. I'm joined by Greg Baxter, Senior VP of Customer Experience at edynamic. Greg is a true veteran of digital marketing and its evolution as a critical business channel. He's driven web strategies, customer engagement, and personalization strategies and the implementation of content management systems for several of the AmLaw Top 20 and many Fortune 500 firms. What's also important is that prior to edynamic, he did 8 years at Sitecore, where as part of the business optimization services team, he was responsible for guiding marketers around how they could make the best use of their marketing technology stack and drive ROI on their marketing technology spends. All right, so we've put together a bit of an agenda around what we intend to cover in this webinar today. We'd briefly talk about digital client engagement, then cover what goes into creating an efficient client engagement roadmap. And from there, we'd move on to the actual demo of the site and then cover potential first steps to client engagement. Good? Okay. Right. So before we get into it, I mean, just to give you a bit of a history here around what prompted us to do this webinar and demo. edynamic has been servicing law firms for a while now, and over the years, we've had the experience of building many law firm websites, a snapshot of which you can see here on the screen. So across all the sites that we've built, we've gathered best practices that went into the creation of this demo site, part of which we will show to you today. Also, the reason why we chose to build this demo site on Sitecore is because, number one, it's a great, easy to use tool used by many of the top law firms today. And more importantly, it is now available to the mid-market segment at very affordable prices. So with that, I'm going to hand the stage over to Greg, who's our subject matter expert today. Greg, ready?
Yep, thank you very much, Shad, and thank you everybody for joining the session. I'm really excited about talking about this topic today. It's something that's very close to my heart, having spent 9 years now really involved in the web experience management business rather than the traditional web publishing business. So one of the realities of the digital marketing world today is that we're no longer in a publishing era mindset. We're in a true client engagement era mindset where we create really engaging one-to-one experiences so that firms have a relationship with their clients and prospects through their site rather than just a real at the drive-in kind of experience where they may come back to the website and see pretty much the same thing every time. And the reason the industry has moved to this has been really largely driven by humanity's rank and file. We no longer expect to see the same thing when we visit a website, and we really do expect websites to sense and adapt to who we are and what we want in real time. And every analyst on the planet's work has validated this. We know that customer experience leaders revenue outgrows laggards by double digits. We know that many businesses now are competing on customer experience or client engagement because that is the cohesive social glue that really keeps prospects interested in your offerings and keeps your current clients engaged across long periods of time. And of course, everybody by now knows the famous Gartner statement that you must be really competitive with your company in terms of its customer obsession and have a deep knowledge of who clients are and keep them engaged. And I really wanted to start off this way because that sounds very business to consumer-ish. And in fact, business to consumer really started that whole kind of model or paradigm, if you like. But business to business is no longer immune from this. Salesforce, Forrester, and Gartner have all recognized that anybody who is doing business from their site with other businesses, which is so often the case with firms, really need to be able to present the right content to the right people at the right time and keep them engaged in the site and present an experience with them whereby they don't have to hunt for the critical data that's going to make somebody want a relationship with you. And we use an enormous amount of thought leadership to drive people to our website, from LinkedIn articles or what have you, to the site. So most firms are spending a great deal of time and money at the moment building out thought leadership assets like webinars and blogs and insights and news articles and podcasts and all manner of digital things that really lead to client engagement. So thought leadership really is the dialogue today that leads to both acquisition, but it also leads for clients to remain engaged with your digital channels if you do this right. And by that I mean, if somehow you can magnetize exactly the right content for exactly the right client, and they never really receive an email or see a digital communication that is not relevant to them, you're in fact training them that the information that you provide is easy to get at and super relevant. Of course, the flip side to this is that we create vast amounts of this stuff, and there's so much content on many firms' websites that it's literally like digging for gold. You need to bring a shovel to some, or actually most websites, in order to find content. And it doesn't really matter how well you've made your search or how intuitive your navigation is. The reality is we generate so much thought leadership pieces that we end up with the usual kind of page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. And I'd love you to reflect on this sort of concept. When you search for something on Google, you don't typically get to page 8. So a lot of thought leadership is really buried very deep in the information architecture. So the idea behind client engagement and using personalization and these kind of tactics is to magnetize the right content to the right user. So if I'm a client and I'm looking for maybe taxation advice, or I'm an existing client who's engaged with you around taxation, when I come to your website, or when I see a post on LinkedIn, or when I receive an email from you, it makes a great deal of sense that that is around taxation items, so that you never generate or never send irrelevant content to someone. Because the minute you send people irrelevant content in today's age, they disengage very quickly. And that leads to A, somebody never coming back to your website, regardless of how much content you create, and B, unsubscribing from your news feed, because we have very little time to wade through stuff that's not relevant. So not very long ago, I was talking with a customer of ours, and before the engagement, I kind of sat down on their site and did a little bit of searching. And I came up with this. There were 890 news articles on this website. There were over 3,000 alerts on the site. There were 1,300 blogs and resources on the site, 162 videos, 131 this, 584 that. I'm sure you get the picture. That is an enormously deep content repository. So firstly, a vast amount of money and time has been spent generating these things. Secondly, out of that 1,300 blogs, how is it remotely possible that I will have high visibility of the blog that is exactly right for me to read? It's literally a tree that's lost in a forest. And just as importantly, how can you tell how well all of those thought leadership pieces are performing? And the answer to that is by actually measuring them in terms of engagement, but a little more than that, measuring their engagement effectiveness through a lens of, did they lead to actions on the website that generate business for a particular firm? What you're looking at now, and I've obviously redacted company information here because this is live, is a holistic dashboard of engagement of a particular firm. So you can see that we're looking at things like publications viewed, event registrations, and so forth, but we're really looking at them through the lens of, did they achieve high business value outcomes like bios viewed, V cards downloaded, and contacts made. So if you assign this magical engagement value score to that, and you tie it to the end goal, which in a firm is typically contact attorney, download V card, or attend a webinar or even attend an event, then you can very quickly see which companies who are visiting your website are really highly engaged. So you would continue to communicate with them in exactly the way that you are right now, but you will also see the companies that are not engaged very well. So you can, of course, come up with content strategies and marketing strategies to help that. We also show which channels are driving the most value for you. So your marketers can make a decision on whether they need to push up the marketing spend on social, whether their paid marketing is working well, and so forth. So it's a real snapshot of health around your site. And beyond that holistic view, you can drill down into an individual attorney's view. And you can very quickly see which of your attorneys are superstar content generators and which ones might need a little bit of help in order to drive those really critical V cards, event registrations, and the very large conversions that you want to drive on your website. So we have, of course, a process to get there. I mean, all of this stuff sounds like it will take forever and a day to do. Nothing could be further than the truth when you run a tool set like Sitecore. And what we really want to do very quickly is take firms from a traditional spot right down low on the left on the client engagement engine roadmap, where they do have a CMS and, you know, they're kind of shoveling content into the steam engine, you know, as quickly as they can. They're really measuring traffic. So they're still sort of saying, fantastic, we had 5,000 more people to the website. But if you kind of asked how engaged those people were or what they did, you typically get the sound of crickets, because it's not being measured around did they engage with this. So we want to take that traditional model where it's kind of spray and pray, shotgun based outbound marketing, some ad hoc social stuff, up into a thing that we call time to value. And time to value is a really quick business win, Sitecore centric first step. So we turn on engagement analytics, we set up the personalization that you're going to see in a couple of minutes, we set up the profiling, and we have an instrumented site that will now sense and adapt to customer client experience and behavior in real time, delivering the right content, calls to action, events, and all of the rest of it, webinars that we generate. And the third step is to share that rich client engagement data with our outbound marketing capability, whether that's Vuture or Sitecore's own. So we tap that into the marketing automation platform. And of course, this is all really valuable customer or client intel. So we push that very typically into CRM systems like Interaction or Microsoft Dynamics or Salesforce, or really any variant of it. You'll find that Sitecore now has an interface called XConnect, which lets you pick up all of this data and transport it to any system. So the intent here is not to make an 18-month project. Time to value can typically be done inside 30 days. So if you're a Sitecore owner right now who's got a static website, within 1 month, you could be having a website that does the things that you will see very, very shortly. And honestly, within 90 days, within a quarter, you could have a full client engagement engine running. Because we don't share all of the data, we share the critical and actionable analytics and data that makes sense for us to record. And we turn this big data issue into a little data reality by just making sure we measure the right subset or the small things. So to show you how those things work in parallel together, I've got a diagram on the page now, and this is kind of how it works. It typically starts with the center pillar here, if you like, Vuture or some kind of marketing automation platform, sends out a top of funnel nurture message. And it might be a LinkedIn thing, it might be an email to existing clients, and it typically pushes a typical article. So often these things are segmented. So when somebody reads that link or clicks on that link and hits the Sitecore website, the website is automatically instrumented and personalized to reflect the content and intent that that article sent out via email was sent to generate. So we'll just use tax as an example. So I send out a taxation-based top of funnel nurture email or a prospect email. Sitecore recognizes the inbound link that anybody clicks on, and the articles, the webinars, the testimonials, the case studies, all build out around tax. Of course, we show other things, but above the fold in high priority stuff, we show things that mirror the customer's intent. tax. So they might read a tax article, and we might have a piece of gated content at that point, whereby somebody has to, sign in with their email address to basically see a high value piece of content. That tips that person into the mid funnel there. And at the same time, over on the extreme right in interaction or a CRM, we're marking this whole customer engagement right now, or client engagement, as low engagement, because they haven't really done anything to show us yet that they're a highly engaged client or prospect. So now we have their email address, they move into mid-funnel because, they're actually becoming more and more engaged. Nobody shares an email address easily these days. So we would then send out some information directly to them, asking them for maybe to sign up for a newsletter or view a webinar. If they undertake either of those activities, in future and interaction, or whatever those variants are, or in fact even in Sitecore alone, it has all of this capability itself now, those people are marked as medium engagement. And what we want to do now is recognize their lead score, for want of a better term, or level of engagement, and then we would push out messaging around download a V-card, contact us, or come to an event, which typically is really bottom of funnel and at the pointy end behavior that has the ability to affect revenue, and certainly has the ability to affect long-term relationships and engagement. At that point, they're marked as a high engagement opportunity or client inside interaction, and we really, regardless of whether they're a prospect or an existing client, we really, really, really want to keep that person close. If they're an existing client, we're probably going to now start looking at what logical other content from other practice areas we would want to introduce this particular highly engaged client to. So the idea here is to have these three really critical pillars of your digital marketing stack working in total symphony. So the website knows where somebody is in the marketing automation plan, and the CRM is capturing all of that data. So if we want to have a look at how that works in real time and what it looks like from the customer experience, I'm just very quickly going to pull up a demo website that steps you through what this looks like from the customer's perspective, or the client's perspective rather, and how we measure and how we look at that engagement value. So I'm just going to jump out of here, and I'm going to open up Explorer, and I'm going to go through to a website that is built out around a typical firm. So I'm just going to explain the interface of this site before we do anything. So like a lot of websites, right at the top it's got the big rotating hero banner. So there are four graphics that are rotating through the banner image, and I always wonder when I see these things as default content, who kind of sits around and waits till the fourth or the fifth banner, and is it pot luck that I see the banner that is going to relate to me? And we could sidestep that so nicely by personalization, which you'll see in just a moment. And secondly, on this page, we have a couple of fairly typical thought leadership widgets happening here. Firstly, we've got our news, and as ever, it's the latest news on the top first. But over on the left, we have a thought leadership piece around solving transaction tax challenges in mergers and acquisitions. But rather than having this just sit here, published forever and set in stone, the Find Out More button underneath it actually triggers an inbuilt and native Sitecore automation piece that will step this user through each of the steps that we want them to move through to go from somebody just visiting the website to somebody who registers for that all-important thought leadership webinar. So the other important thing to see on this website is this tricky little and sneaky little I button on the side. And all this is doing is it's exposing some of the information that is available to us via the Sitecore Experience database. And right now, and it's certainly not all of the information, it's just a subset for this particular demo. And of course, we would never expose this in the real world. This is just for us to see what's happening here. So right now, it's telling me that my engagement value is 0. I've visited the site just once, and I've just seen the homepage so far. So I'm super low engagement. Nothing is happening here at all. My personal information is does not exist yet. I'm anonymous, and with Sitecore, regardless of whether I'm anonymous or not, it is going to keep my individual behavior record and my individual experience database level until that point where I sign up for gated content or sign into a webinar or something, and then it's going to bind all of my rich anonymous profiling data with my actual record of note and push that into a CRM. And all of this stuff is actionable by Sitecore personalization. So that's really key. I'm also not profiled as anything because I haven't visited any pages that lets the system know who I am or the practice areas or industry I'm interested in. I've triggered no significant engagement goals on the website, and I have not hit any business outcomes yet. So the first part of this demo I'm going to quickly go through is what happens with personalization, and later in this session I'm going to show you how this was done. So this is not kind of you know, the magic show. I really want to show you how simple it is to do this stuff. So let's say I land on this website, and you saw a minute ago I'm not profiled at all, and I go through to my corporate law page. What's happening here really simply is that this corporate law page is tagged with a profile of, in this case, Lucas the lawyer. So when I jump back into my analytics here, you can see that by visiting this page, I've now been profiled as a legal persona. I have a 94% pattern match on Lucas the lawyer. If I go back to my home page now or visit subsequent pages or even come back on another visit, the website is now personalized in the hero image to talk specifically at somebody from the legal fraternity, the Lucas the lawyer persona. And personas or profiles are not set in stone. So if I continue to navigate around, and maybe I go now to something that's very different, you know, trusts, estates, and tax law, which is more aimed at, you know, mums and dads or business people rather than specifically lawyers. And I just navigate a little bit around the site. And like most people do, eventually I'll have a bit of a look around at a lot of things while I build trust, and then I'll zero in on what it is that I really want to engage with the firm about. So if we look at my profile now, it's now switched out to be Margaret the mother, which means that, you know, it's no longer appropriate for this website to talk to me like I was a lawyer. I'm now, you know, potentially a client. I'm potentially a client around estates and tax law. And if I go back home again, my hero image and my major call to action has switched out to talk to me directly. So the first thing to really understand about profiles is that they trigger personalization around what I'm interested in right now in real time, and it's super, super powerful stuff and very, very simple to instrument. So let's keep going and get into some sort of much cooler stuff. So as I said, you know, you guys create a ton of thought leadership, and thought leadership is an absolutely critical undertaking in order to grow new clients and to keep clients engaged over long periods of time. So in this instance, I am interested in transactional tax challenges in mergers and acquisitions, and I click the Find Out More button. The Find Out More button triggers an engagement automation piece that in this instance is completely built out inside Sitecore. So I don't have to go out to a marketing automation package or anything like that, although if I'm running Future or Eloquor or Marketo, we can do all of that as well. So I'm going to fill this out, and today I'm going to be Jason Murphy at me.com. My first name is Jason. My last name is Murphy, and I'm going to submit this. So I've just taken a pretty major step, and by pressing this button, Sitecore is going to record a very large jump from a not engaged user to an engaged user, and more importantly, someone that's entire experience now is in a nurture path towards me getting involved in this webinar. Right now, I'm just finding out about it. So it's going to send me some information, says kind of thank you, and the usual thing happens. But if I go now and look at my critical XDB information, my engagement has now leapt to 25 points. So I'm being bubbled up in the kind of bottomless pit of analytics out of, you know, someone who might be one of 50,000 people who visited the site this month to being somebody who's important. Why am I important? Because my engagement value is rising, and I am recognized now as being in an engagement plan around a webinar nurture. So, you know, everyone who runs a webinar wants people in them, and then obviously they want people in real live events, and they want to ultimately drive to contact attorney, download vCard. This is a major trust builder along the way. So I'm now engaged in that engagement plan. My personal information is captured. It knows that I'm Jason Murphy now, so it's never going to treat me like, you know, like I'm a member of a flock of birds or a school of fish. I am me, and the site will treat me as an individual. My on-site behavior says that I've triggered the following goals. I've viewed the legal webinar page, I've viewed the more info page, and I've viewed this page, and I now have some business outcomes being recorded, not just in the Psycor experience database, but pushed into my marketing automation platform and also pushed into my CRM. And that's a major step. I have gone from an unknown visitor to a known contact, which means, of course, you can talk to me via email, you could talk to me via LinkedIn, you can certainly personalize my journey on the website. So we'll keep going with this. I'm not through the nurture path yet. And maybe I don't do this today, but I come back, I don't know, 2 days later or something like that, and my hero image is completely reinforcing where I am in this nurture path. So now it's pushing me at the right time to sign up to the tax webinar. Furthermore, this spot underneath, this engagement piece underneath, has now recognized that I'm in this state of the nurture plan, so it's reinforcing that I register for the webinar. And this information is following me around the website. If I go to the About Us page, you can see that this image and call to action over here also knows where I am in this particular flow, and is also pushing me to sign up to the taxation webinar. So I'll go back home and I'll do precisely what this system wants me to do, and I'll go through to the registration point. Huge goal. I've now gone from somebody who's kind of interested on the website to letting one of your attorneys talk to me for an hour or so about an area of practice and probably an industry that I'm really interested in. Psycor, of course, remembers me now. To visit the webinar and click register now. So again, a ginormous step in engagement has been undertaken, and it's recognized inside Psycor, inside your marketing automation platform, and inside your CRM. So my engagement has now leapt up to 55 points. It now knows where I am in the engagement plan. I'm now registered for this webinar, and even if I don't turn up, of course, I'm going to be invited to see a movie of it later or a recording of it later, but I am pretty highly engaged at this point in time. My personalization, my personal information is still there, but now I have actually hit a business outcome that has gone beyond contact acquisition, and because I've actually registered for the legal webinar, which up here gave me a high level 30 engagement points, I am now sitting in the CRM system as a potential marketing lead, particularly, of course, if I'm not a known contact. If I'm an existing client, it's now saying that I'm a highly engaged existing client. But in this particular case, I'm now a strong and decent prospect for this particular business. So I close this now, go back to my home page, or you know, come back in 2 days, 10 days, whatever. You can set a decay rate around this stuff, but it will remember people from session to session. It's now swapped out this placeholder again to say enjoy a complimentary white paper. So think about this. The placeholders that you have on your website now that have previously been set in stone say the same thing time after time after time, with the exception of the news bit, which will probably show the latest news article or whatever, but it's hardly kind of earth-shattering stuff in terms of engagement. But this site is understanding precisely the sequence of data that I should be presented to lead me to a business level outcome, i.e. becoming a customer, attending a webinar, attending an event, whatever that kind of might be. So if I download the white paper, of course, that is going to register that I've done that as well, and my engagement will go up a little bit, and we will move into the next nurture flow that the firm wants me to do in order to bring me really, really close. So this same capability works via email. So if I were, this person who's just joined this webinar and it was around tax, I might at, 7 o'clock tomorrow night or at 6 o'clock tomorrow night or whatever time, get an email about an older pre-recorded webinar related to tax, not something that's completely outside my interest level. And when I come back to the website, the information that I see as a priority reflects the practice area that I'm interested in. Of course, we don't filter bubble, people into an existence where they only see tax stuff. They're also able to see other things, but we do bring a priority to bring the content, magnetize the content that's deep in the information architecture. It might be on page 10 of search or something which no one is ever going to see, but it's an important piece of thought leadership, is now going to be magnetized up and brought to the surface for this particular visitor or client. Other clients who are on your website are seeing their own personalized and customized experience. So this is really the technology that has driven the category killer successes of most of the globally successful web 2.0 and so forth kind of websites on the planet. It used to be fiercely expensive to afford this. It is no longer the case. Software and platform as a service has made this technology available to pretty much everybody on the planet. I mean, I was part of Sitecore for 8 years. I sold an awful lot of Sitecore in my life, and I know that when I started at Sitecore that it was one expensive piece of kit, and now I can make it part of my cap or OpEx by having a monthly cost that relates directly and only to the amount of interactions I have on the website. So I can start small and I can grow. The best thing about this, of course, is that I get the full amount of capability. It's not kind of onion skin. So that gives you an example of the kinds of things you see as a client using this kind of technology, and it also has given you a little bit of a view about the incredible amount of data that we capture about clients when we utilize this sort of level of activity. So I think you would all agree that when you're sitting there reflecting on your own websites right now, that they're not actually doing that, but you will also be reflecting that there's an awful lot of websites that you visit just in your life that are doing this. And they tend to be the ones that are, fantastically successful at keeping people engaged, or indeed, and dare I say it, driving customer acquisition and revenue. I love nothing more than sitting down and creating these kinds of strategies that let you prove that the thought leadership you generated literally drove X dollars in revenue, and that is entirely achievable at this point. So it's time now to talk about how we might get there. So I'm just clicking through some steps to client engagement. And the idea behind this is to keep this really simple and really focused and really small. This, as I said, can be just a 30 to 60 to 90 day exercise, but you will get, from a Sitecore's perspective, an optimized site well and truly inside 30 days. So the first thing we need to consider is where to personalize the website. So a lot of people, when they talk about personalization, can't conceptualize what that project looks like. How big is it? How many content items do I need? Where are we going to personalize? What does it all mean? Am I going to spend the rest of my life, slavishly creating more and more and more content to feed the beast? And the answer is no. And the way you do that is to really cleverly define what it is you're going to personalize. So I would recommend that you always personalize the homepage hero image. It's a no-brainer to create very simple campaign, profile, kind of hero images that might be based, as you saw in that example, on the area of law I was interested in. It's certainly always done around campaigns that are high value. And we might also, on the home page, just personalize a midsection like that. So what we're training people and return clients to do, and prospective new clients, is to perceive that the website is going to personalize in a number of spots, and they won't sit there and ever think, gee, I'm being tracked. That they're just going to have a better experience. So some take homes here. only pick a couple of spots on the homepage, and only do 1 or 2 spots at that, if that, on follower pages. We don't want to turn this into von Richthofen's flying circus. We do not want to give people epilepsy. We want to do ambient personalization that drives a business outcome. So above the fold is really important. It's really important to build in calls to action here, and of course, don't make everything personal. So we want to create these experiences that are pretty simple to do. The second thing that we need to do is be able to measure this stuff. All of the personalization in the world without a measurement or metric underneath it is truly like running with scissors. It's kind of dangerous, and there's no real point. It's not something you would do. So again, the concept around the Sitecore engagement scale is simplicity. So we have a really simple scale here that starts off down the bottom at this beginning of the customer journey where somebody's reading an article. They're not a terribly engaged client or prospect. They might watch a video, but the second they step into gated content and newsletter subscription and go from unknown to known, they are medium engaged because they have trusted us with their contact details, and they've allowed us to create a digital relationship with them, and we're enabled to send them communications. And those communications really ought to be about stuff at the top of the engagement value scale. Contact an attorney, download a V-card, register for an event or a webinar. So the simpler you make this, the better. And I always think about things like balanced business scorecards here, which hardly ever have more than 7 things in them. The biggest, think about it, the biggest businesses in the world run a balanced success scorecard that has less than more in it. So this is holistically the marketing health of your website, based on the consumption of thought leadership and the clear relationship of that thought leadership and a person to a high level conversion. So it's not rocket science to do this stuff. You know, edynamic runs a workshop where we do all of the stuff you're about to see now in one day. So the third thing that we need to do is establish profiles so that we can determine who is on the site in real time and what's their interest. And of course, this leads us the ability to surface relevant content across the board. So I'm just going to spend 1 second here defining this stuff. Predictive personalization is defined as the ability to predict client or customer behavior based on the real-time activity and then target offers, calls to action, and comms very, very precisely. Really wordy way of saying this. If I was on a car site and I was looking at 4-wheel drives, don't show me a sports car. Like really boiling it down to the reality, this is what it is. If I'm interested in intellectual property law, show me the thought leadership around intellectual property law. Show me the legal team around intellectual property law. Show me an easy way to contact the partner around intellectual property law. And don't make me search or scroll through tons and tons and tons of stuff to get there. So in Sitecore, a profile is basically a bucket, and it's just a big bucket used to describe visitor behavior or client behavior. And typically with a firm, I would look at 2 things first up. What practice area they're interested in, IP, tax, you know, corporate law, blah, blah, blah. And what industry are they from? Is this maritime? Is this government? Is this healthcare? And if I know those 2 things, I can triangulate on the content that I know these people want. So the profile is the bucket, if you like, and then underneath that bucket are the profile keys like tax, litigation, IP, and profiles are really simply created by marketers, and of course we help create these with the marketing team for knowledge transfer, and then they are simply applied to content. So what you're looking at here is the Sitecore content tree. There's a page there on trust, estates, and tax law. And when I land on that page inside Sitecore, there is a tool up in the top right-hand corner. And when I click on that, all of my profiles pop out. I target anybody who visits that site, and I tag them as, you know, the Margaret, the mother persona, and my job is done, right? It's going to now profile me based on the content that I'm looking at. We then use really simple rules-based personalization to surface the outcomes of this. So it's really simple to create these profiles. So a lot of people think, oh, profiles, personas, really complicated, long journey, all of that stuff. Completely not true. A machine-based profile or persona comes down to what are you interested in, where are you in the journey, and what have we got that we can present to you to help you make your decisions. So if I was looking at a firm, and you'll notice I've grabbed a couple of firms, off Google or whatever, to show this out. You've actually already done your profiling work. You just called it something else. So if I clicked on the work navigation item here, I get the drop down of all of your practice areas, and there they are right there. So if I'm going to make a profile, the first profile I'm going to make is corporate and finance. So I can tag every webinar around corporate and finance. I can tag every thought leadership piece, and then I can drill down even further and say corporate and finance. This one's about banking and finance. This next one is about tax. There's one about infrastructure and so forth. So the work you've already put into working out, the careful work you've put into working out your information architecture is often the way I discover these profiles. So no rocket science in this. And I see on a lot of firms, they'll have areas of speciality broken up by industry and by practice area. Just do that. It's way enough in the first instance. So straight away, if I were working on this firm, I would make 13 profiles. I would start with corporate and finance, and I would break that down into what you see in the submenu, and I would go right through it, and I would end up with tax credit finance and syndication. And to put these profiles together, I'm looking at this, and I've done this many, many times. I'm thinking that's an hour's work, no more. Yeah, and we can programmatically assign these profiles to content. So somebody doesn't have to sit there like it was the Stone Age and click on content and add these things manually. There are faster ways to do it. So I have my profiles. I know where I'm going to personalize. The only other thing that I'm going to want to do is use Sitecore's out-of-the-box personalization rules to create those amazing experiences. And this is all point and click stuff. There is no code involved in any of this. So just picked another site here, Allen and Overy, and what we would do in this instance is use rules-based personalization, and rules-based personalization is the low-hanging fruit that drives very rapid personalization. So there's a bunch of rules here. I can use them. We call it the digital fingerprint. It's really simple to exploit. It's designed for a marketer to implement themselves, and what we're basically doing is saying, here you'll notice I've just clicked, and we have on a default website, a find a lawyer function on a website that is enabled to understand the geolocation of where you've actually visited the site from. You may well be able to say, okay, here is our New York City office because we know this visitor is from New York City. I could also build out a placeholder on this to show my New York City partner and so forth. And we might have a list of companies that we want to work for. So we can create a register of the IP addresses of those companies that we're interested in, and we can surface content we know that's of interest to that company. And then finally, it's a no-brainer to build out the hero image with a campaign around maybe a tax webinar or whatever, and that would be if my profile was interested in tax, and you saw that through the demo that we sort of saw before. So what we're looking at here is a grand total of 5 rules on the page and a couple of content items. I will stress that rather than generate new content items, we really search for content items that are already part of your content repository. So it's not about creating tons and tons and tons of new ones. It's about identifying ones that exist in your information architecture and making sure they have high visibility for people who come to the website. So the last thing I will say, and I'm thankful very much for your time, I appreciate it immensely, is that edynamic runs a workshop called the Business of Engagement, where we literally do all of the work that you just saw with your own website and present it to your stakeholders, because we know how hard it is to walk into a CMO or to walk into an attorney and say, you know, there's really something about this personalization stuff, because it's phenomenally difficult to explain. There's a whole bunch of jargon. So we look at your firm, we look at your business areas, we look at your practice areas, we put together a strategy, we take your website and we mock it up so that we can show the audience exactly what happens when optimization, like you just saw, is turned on. We show the business outcomes we will be trying to generate increases around. So let's say 25% increases in V-card downloads, let's say 30% increase in case study downloads, and let's say a 15% increase in contact us or contact attorney. And you know, web conversions are really, really, really low. We all know that. And as Shad said before, I've been doing this for a very long time, and I have been involved in projects like this where we've been able to increase those core conversions by 60% to 400%, and in some cases I've seen 700% increases in really key measurable business outcomes. So now is kind of the time to go from a publishing era mindset where you're just sweating away, tipping more and more and more and more content into the mill, not really understanding the value output and not being able to measure the value output of that. And I'd really encourage you to get in touch with us. The business of engagement is, of course, completely free. We love to do these kinds of things, and it can really help you make a business case to take the next step in your digital evolution. I'm now would love to open the floor to questions if anybody has any. So Shad, people might have typed some questions in through the chat or sent them to us, and I'd be very happy to answer them.
Yep, Greg, so just looking at the questions, we have a few. So let's start with the first one that we have over here. I'm going to read the question to you.
Sure.
So does this mean I have to create a lot of new content for personalization?
That's a question I get all of the time. And there's two answers here. Firstly, if your site does not have a lot of really specific content, you can do that. The value in it is that you know exactly what content to create because you know who's on your website in real time. The second answer is no, absolutely not. We work very hard to minimize the amount of content impact, and we would probably create more content around decorative calls to action than actual content. So we would prefer to change the calls to action and the hero image to drive people to conversions rather than create pages and pages and pages of new content. Secondly, we look very closely throughout the entire content repository to tag content that already exists. And if you think back to the customer I referenced earlier who had, like, really seriously probably 3,000 content items sitting in their content repository, I would probably only tag and affect the top 30% or 20% of that in the first instance. Because I think when you go back to that repository, you pretty quickly realize that you've got very aged content in there, and you may go through and tag it all at some point, but I would really focus on maybe the 10 to 15 or 20% that's going to drive business conversions.
Great. So here's the second question that I'm looking at. How much work is involved in content tagging?
Okay, another really good question. The smartest way to approach this is to do things like build those profile values into the actual templates, the data templates of the pages that house them. So what that means is if I go through and I create a new page under the tax law, heading, then it will automatically pick up the tax profile. So firstly, you don't have to burden your content authors with manually tagging at all if the site is set up like that. And the second thing is you can programmatically go through and tag great numbers of content very, very quickly. I worked for a company in Singapore not that long ago who had something like 30,000 pages on their website, and we basically programmatically tagged all of their content repository over the course of a couple of hours.
Okay, great. There are some other questions as well. So here's the other one. Roughly speaking, how long does it take to build this out?
Okay, so we really focus on making sure we're when we work with our customers that we are not wasting time. So we're really looking at this through the lens of how can we shift, the engagement or revenue needle with the minimum amount of work. So we do have a rule of thumb that we will write a strategy that we know can be implemented from soup to nuts, from consultancy, recommendations, document, presentation back to the stakeholders, actual implementation and testing within 30 days to optimize Sitecore. It's my belief that an additional 30 days would be taken to integrate all of this and to have the plumbing to share that rich client intel with marketing automation, and then probably another 30 if you wanted to go full marketing digital transformation to have that all integrated with a CRM. So you're talking about a phenomenal result inside a business quarter if you just want to sort of do the Sitecore piece of this inside 30 days all day long.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's all the questions that we can take today. There are other questions as well. We will get back to you with via email and respond to those questions. Well, thank you everyone for attending this webinar and being with us, spending time with us. Thank you, Greg, and we look forward to engaging with you. If there are any questions, do write to us. You see Greg's email on the screen. You can write to him. You can write to me at shad, shad.alam@edynamic.net. I hope you have that. Well, great. Thank you, everyone. All of you have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everybody.